want to go? Oh, should I start now?
Uh, sure, yeah. Everything's good.
Oh, cool. Hello, everyone. Hope y'all are having a wonderful day hacking away. I'm Grace, and today I'll be talking about how to create effective design systems. This is a good way to make sure your design is standardized throughout your product, and also talking about little best practices about working with developers as a designer from my experiences at EA. If you want in the chat, comment where y'all are from or where you want to travel to. See a lot of Vancouver, CST, and oh man, nice. And for our adventure for today, I'll go over a brief introduction, what are design systems, some visual design fundamentals, some components, and Figma best practices to help you scale your designs. If you're working in Figma, that's the tool that I'm most familiar in, and some best practices for designer and developer collaboration. And a bit about myself is full-time. I'm a product/UX designer at Electronic Arts, focusing on building products for creators and events. In the past, I've built design systems, both enterprise and consumer-facing ones, and scaling for all kinds of products. And I founded Design Buddies for fun, and it kind of blew up. So here we are. And my background's actually in bio and computer engineering. I studied that in school just before deciding to pivot into design. I was actually pre-med and all that fun stuff, and born and raised in California, SFA area. For fun, I like to draw, make 3D art, run, and do a lot of social media. And because of legal purposes, all views are my own and do not represent a stance or anything has to do with EA or Design Buddies. And yeah, in the chat, what are all y'all backgrounds? What are you studying in school? Are you a career transitioner? Let me know in the chat. CS and Web3, nice. Career transitioner, nice. What are you transitioning from? Futurist, nice. Education from UX design, electrical engineering, realtor, web dev, administration, nice. Wow, very diverse. Career transitioning from digital advertising. Very cool, very cool. Marketing design to PM, nice. I work with a lot of PMs as well. Fun to work with. Career pivot from social media management and dog grooming. That's so fun. I used to play now and 10 dogs and groomed my pets there and groomed my dogs there too. Graphic to UX, nice. Very, very cool. Thanks y'all for sharing. And it's a bit about my background. Oh, finance and tech. That's so cool. For me, growing up, I really wanted to be an anime artist. I thought school was boring and I drew a lot. I was a big fan of anime, so I just drew a lot in class. And then I also was really big into social media and blogging because I was kind of nerd in school, and throughout like middle school and high school, I didn't really get along with a lot of my classmates. I was never the popular kid, but I had a lot of friends on the internet. So I created like a social media blog. And then in college, I was also an avid cross-country track runner in high school. And that inspired my major of bioengineering and pre-med because I want to learn how to biohack myself to run faster. So I did that. And I realized I got really bored working in the lab, so I wanted to make games. So I studied CS and pivot to that direction. And then after doing some like game development internships, I realized I like level design a lot and UX experience design. So that's why I pivot to UI UX and product design. Along the way, created content on social media, started blogging, did a little art business where I tabled at anime conventions and built Design Buddies. So I always like having like random side hustles outside of what I do. I feel like especially like in design or anyone in tech, it's like important to have a lot of hobbies outside because especially for design, everything kind of like relates back into design. So it's important to like not live and breathe UX, but like learn a lot of other fields as well. That's just like stuff that helped me advance in my career as well. So design systems, you think of this as like a central language for all of your product. So what is it? Before I get started, how familiar are all of you with design systems? Like, what do you think design systems are? Let me know in the chat. Like, when you think of design systems, what comes in your mind? Sale guide for a magazine. Interesting. Oh, style guide. It can be. I would say the process by which UX and dev come with the product, code docs, guide to copy, colors. I would say it's a combination of a little bit of all of that. Help designers and dev align with design. So yes, it helps with that. I would say it's a little bit of all of what you mentioned. Kind of a style guide, but also when in the enterprise setting, all of your components and styles are linked to like a token where you can use the code as well with engineers. It also helps designers be consistent in their design, making sure they're using existing styles and components and staying on brand for business goals as well. So lots of parties get involved. But yes, it's like a system of like reusable components. So think of like your buttons, your modals. So they're standard throughout your whole product, and they're usually shared by a whole team. A lot of designers, developers, product managers, researchers, and more use all of this to create a consistent product with a consistent experience throughout. It's also like goes beyond the UI kit. The UI kit is kind of like one part of it, kind of like style guide for magazines, just like the look and feel of it. The design system also includes like the tokens and the code repository as well. And yeah, it basically helps you collaborate more effectively. Instead of like having to come up with something new each time, you can you can have like one central place where one source of truth to help you like build faster. And for design systems, it's always like living and breathing. You never have to, it's never like really done. There's always like iterations that can come. Like if you need another component, you can add it there. It's not like nothing is ever set in stone, but these are just some standards that you can start with. And usually in an enterprise setting, you have like a whole team for design systems that work at, for example, like just sharing my experiences at like EA mostly, without digging too detailed, not violating any NDAs. But usually you have like designers who help define like the visual stuff, the usages, use cases, front end team who helps build the code from these components, product management just make sure these things like stay on brand. Also, research helps with that too, doing some accessibility testing, validating some user needs with it. And sometimes for copywriting, you have like content writers to help shape like the voice and tone, support like different principles throughout as well. So it's like a whole team effort, but you don't need like everyone, but usually like in your case for hackathon, like it's good to have like a central language, but in like the real world setting, this is usually in like big companies how they structure design system teams. Yeah, you build products faster, scalable, consistently cost products, more monies. Basically, you can make stuff faster. Usually in the content of design system, there's like a style guide, which is one thing that y'all mentioned. Component library, content guide, so voice and tone, some kind of like brand guidelines that gets interweaved among your component library and design system as well. Accessibility guide, some examples and some patterns and reference sites. Like if you ever looked at like how many of you ever seen like Google Material or Apple Human Interface? Like let me know in the chat if you're familiar with those. Those are essentially the reference sites of design systems. Yeah, exactly. And to kind of like break it down further, there's a great system to explain design systems called Atomic Design Principle. Oh, yes, Material UI, and yeah, the design system is also another one as well. For Atomic Design Principles, like I come from like a science background, so I really like this analogy. It's kind of like breaking down different component in their hierarchies. For example, buttons or like atoms, the smallest unit are like standalone elements like buttons, and then icons, fields, and molecules are like assemblies of these atoms like modals, which might include a button or might include some icons. And then organisms, these are like bigger structures that might include several molecules, and then scaling up to like templates and pages. Some examples, yes, we have our material design system. Now we have material 3. And also Adobe has one as well. And Salesforce has one. There's a lot of great ones that you all can use to reference. I believe I share somewhere in this doc, but there's like a website that links like all the companies' design systems you can see in one place. And you can also find examples of these on Figma in the Figma community library. And then how to build your own. First, depending on like what product, because like you usually build the design system as you're building a product. You never really want to like follow one-to-one like what other people are doing, because just like in life in design, it depends on what you need. And so definitely do an audit of your product to see like what you need. And also start like standardizing your visual design, like your colors, typography, what visual style you're going to use, and what kind of components you need as well. And yeah, building it as you're building your product. That's like when to get started on it. Never too late to start. And also nothing's set in stone. Like there's always like new use cases that come, so don't feel like pressure to like, oh my god, I need to finish this whole thing. But it's kind of like build it along as well. So now we'll hop into some visual design fundamentals. And these are just some stuff you can consider for your visual design. Definitely want to have some colors that are consistent across, so they're not random and used with intentionality. In typography, there's different like aspects of typography you can consider, and making sure they align to your brand as well. Some spacing, oftentimes when in doubt, I always try to use 8 pixels. Just because screen sizes are like usually an 8-pixel multiple. So when in doubt, like I don't memorize anything, just like when in doubt, just use 8 pixels, 8 multiples of 8 pixels. Can standardize some images, some visual forms, like some shadows or some patterns you want to use as well. So later on, I'll be providing some examples. Here's some colors. This is like the Design Buddies one on their website where you can see this is our style guide / our design system. And just some examples of other ones too. Sometimes you can have different semantic for colors as well, different gradations that you can use. And then so the main colors you want to consider is like, what are your primary colors? And important to decide these like pretty early on because they spread fast and they spread really fast. And you might also want some secondary colors, but optional. So semantic colors as well, like denoting like success state, error state in your product. Also layout colors is your like app like dark theme, light themed and stuff. These are just some color tips. You're all welcome to like take any screenshots as well. I know it's like a lot of like info, and I really like to discourage people to like memorize things since everything can be found on like Google like reference, but they're just some like color tips. So determining the consistent naming, I feel like I would say you don't really have to name your layers, as long as you can find them. But you have to like name your colors to make sure you can find them, and don't put too many. And determining your brand colors early because they spread pretty wildly. And I feel like it's important to make sure that your text color has enough contrast with the background so you can read them. So people who might be hard to vision can see them as well. So checking for accessibility or contrast ratios. There's also like Figma plugins that can like do this really easily for you. And using familiar patterns, like don't use like green for like warning, but use things that have worked in the past. And limiting amount of like, don't use like too many colors, like use with intentionality. And then coolers is like a cool color palette generator if you're having a hard time choosing what colors you want to go with. And so sizes and spacing for your design system. Yeah, when in doubt, 8 pixels usually. Yeah, I love coolers as well. They're very cool because they're cool coolers. Yeah, sometimes like it depends on your team, but at EA, sometimes they have to document things in rems, because like sometimes it just depends on how the framework is built, but usually you can translate between like pixels and rems pretty easily. Yeah, just make sure you're consistent in how you document things and in your redlining, which I'll give an example later on. Typography, there's a lot of use cases to consider when you think of type. There's like marketing where you want to drive like call to action. So this could look like the typography on like your landing page. There's a little editorial where you just want to communicate a lot of information, and data. And there's all like different factors to consider when you want to think of what text style you want to use. There's just some general best practices that I've searched up and found that I've also used at work as well. Considering like line length, typically people don't have texts of too much that are like too long because it makes people like read slower and it might like impact the experience a lot. So these are just some general guidelines of how many characters. And I'll also take questions at the end as well. And for line height, I usually just use like the auto setting on Figma, so no need to like memorize any of this. Just try to make all of y'all's lives easier. Also letter spacing, sometimes you want to have like loose letter spacing or like tight spacing. And this is called kerning that you can adjust in Figma as well. And also letter case, this depends on what tone of voice you're trying to go for. For example, title case is when you have the first letter of each word in title. In sentence case is like when you just the first letter is capitalized. Sentence case tends to be more casual, but whatever one you decide to go with, just make sure it's consistent throughout. Like all the titles are like either all in title case or all of it in sentence case. And yeah, different other font styles to consider is like, do you want to use bold or italic? And these are often used to like emphasize different things or denote a hyperlink, how you want to scale it. There's also another website that I'll share later called Typescale. This is to determine like how big your text could be. And all these factors really affect like accessibility or like readability of your text. And I feel like it's important to consider because that means more people can use your product. And yeah, so more accessible typography guidelines is in general, this is like general guide, use at least 16 pixels, at least on websites, so it's readable. And having like strong contrast ratios that pass like WCAG 2.0. I don't know the exact ratio, but there's like Figma plugins that could tell you the ones as well. As long as it passes, that's where I think it's all good. And font weight, so make sure consider like lighter weight is like hard to read and on like backgrounds as well. And all these like best practices for letter spacing and line height. Make sure these are just things, general guidelines that help your text be easily read by more people. Additional elements you can consider standardizing your design system is like shadows, corners and edges, grid systems, layouts and pages, just a shared language across. And yeah, in summary of the TLDR, font size, min, 16 pixels, try your best. Sometimes it's like not possible, but in general, yeah, having contrast ratios and more. Yeah, these are some resources and my reference. There's this site called Design Systems Checklist that goes more in detail to all of them, and then different color palette generators and typography generators. Oh, thank you. Oh yeah, I like drew all the bunny illustrations on my slides because I like to spice things up. They all have like different expressions. By the way, I forgot to point these out, but yes. And over here, now we're doing components, puzzle pieces. Look at these fluffles, assembly, harvesting jelly beans or like assembling something. Yeah, so in your component library, I related this again to the atomic design system, but having like atoms, molecules, organisms, templates. Here it is again. Oh, thank you, Victoria. I'm glad you like them. I try to like spice things up, like to make things more interesting. Thank you. And yeah, just some tips. I feel like naming layers. So there's like a shortcut in Figma where you can name all your layers. You can highlight them all and do like Command R to rename on Apple. So don't like feel pressure to go in and name everything. You can name everything at the end before your dev handoff. So there's that. And yeah, when you make your design system, this is more for like when you're working for a company and things are like not as fast paced as a hackathon, but having clear documentation onboarding for more people to like actually use it is key as well. Yeah, making it developer friendly and having naming tokens consistent throughout, and just like focusing on like what are the essential components first, or like ones you see the most often, like buttons, your inputs and stuff. I'm glad you like bunnies. I love bunnies as well. I'm happy you're the rabbit. But these are just some button naming conventions you guys can use to determine like what kind of buttons these are. Like these are like the primary button ones. And for example, this is like a default and hover, and then secondary, default and hover. This is what we use on like the Design Buddies website. I've used variants as well on Figma. And this is a little checklist of what you could possibly consider or have on your design system from designsystemchecklist.com. So now these are just some Figma tips. So setting styles. How familiar are y'all with Figma, by the way? Any Figma masters? Are you new to Figma? Haven't used Figma? So I'm just gonna go over kind of new. All right, I'm just going over some tips that'll save you time on Figma. Use it a couple times. Figma Ninja, very comfortable, only knows how to read it. All right, so these are just some tips, definitely beginner friendly about how to Figma lover. Nice. I love Figma as well. We're all Figmates here. Ha, that was a pun. Yeah, so these are just some like time-saving tips as you scale your design system so you don't have to like hard code or like hard make everything. On colors, you can set styles. It's pretty intuitive, I think. You just click on these three dots and then adding different styles that you can like name and use anywhere. If you use slash naming, it will categorize them into nice categories like this to help with organization too. And typography, you can do the same with the styles too, name them. And then yeah, components, it's good to name them. It's good to like use them as well, because you only have to like update one instance for all of it to update as well. Usually at work, we have like a separate component library that we just like auto sync. But if I'm like doing something really quick, I just keep the component library on like a separate page on Figma. And the main thing is just update one instance and everything else updates. So don't need to update everything like manually. And these are just some instructions. Like I can share these slides afterwards so you guys can take a look, but I made a little like tutorial about how to make components and also variants. As you scale to like different states, different buttons, different properties, we can use variants with different types and states that can define on your own, like different like subcategories to further scale and organize your system. So this is what I built a lot at work too. And now some best practices for designer and developer. And after this, I'll be sharing some more resources and hop into Q&A. But yeah, your goal really is like, I feel like what helped like a successful collaboration, like especially in the work setting and with everyone, is just to have everyone involved from the beginning, defining the problem, giving ideas, and just getting everyone involved instead of like having only design and research being involved in the problem at the beginning. I like involving everyone. And I feel like just getting feedback early on, like I feel like the most valuable feedback I ever got from engineers, like they're really good at thinking of edge cases that you usually don't think about. And they're also really good at answering questions for like technical feasibility, because in a real world setting, you have deadlines and sometimes things in the tech stack are not feasible. And so I always just try to ask them for ideas on like my sketches, like what they think. Do they like think it is useful? Do they think it's like scalable? Is it possible in this time frame? And also just having everyone involved, like having product research, business partners, just having everyone, because I noticed that like it's good to just like bounce ideas and helps me like just like learn more and make sure I'm not like missing anything too. And also just understanding each other's skills. Like I don't think designers need to learn how to code. I feel like that's like a debatable topic like on like LinkedIn and stuff, but I don't think as a designer you need to like feel pressure to like be good at coding. But it has helped me become better at like working with engineers and being able to inspect stuff and like talk with them, like seeing what CSS variables need to be changed and like just speeding it up like that. And so design, like having overview of like just how to like read HTML and CSS and JavaScript, or being able to Google stuff and understand what they mean, is like the skill level that like helped me. And for developers, I feel like it's great. I work with developers that are like great at navigating through Figma, so that one's good as well. And also just conducting regular design reviews with everyone, just getting vibe checks all around. And also asking them for feedback about how you guys are working together. And so it's like feedback on designs, but also feedback on the process of how you present, how you like hand off the design reviews, how you document things. Yeah, also edge cases are like use cases that you like the non-happy path essentially. So like what if someone gets banned on your platform? Like what happens to that? Or what if someone tries to register 1,000 users? Do you want a limit? So just like things that are like not the happy path. For design handoffs, typically I like to create prototypes for my work, so showcasing like what interactions, animations, also red lines. So these include like design specs, like what states, interactions, like there's also Figma plugins I can show you that can like do this really easily for you. And different screen sizes, like how the screen would look like on like desktop, tablet, and mobile. And also, yeah, conducting regular design reviews prior to handing off is important to like explain to them where things are, let them give feedback as well. So it's all about like communication and like open dialogue. It helps a lot as well. And what helped me improve, like save a lot of time in communication, is having a handoff meeting before the design gets put on like the Jira tickets for the engineers. And yeah, just getting feedback from them before they start building, because sometimes I might have missed something, or sometimes they might have missed where I documented something. So I just want to show them where everything is, but also make sure I take their feedback into consideration as well. And so redlining, there's like a plugin that can help that do it really easily for you, called Redlines, that I use as well. So there's that you can check out to document your design specs. The resources, some goodies. Yeah, there's lots of like open source design systems on the Figma community that you can like copy to your own Figma and like break it apart and see how they built it. That's how I feel like I got good at Figma, by just trying to like reverse engineer stuff and then just overall making stuff with it. Yeah, these are just like more resources to learn Figma. I mostly found the Figma YouTube tutorial the most helpful, and also the playground files made by the Figma team the most helpful too. And yeah, some resources. These are just like guides to start design, like if you're interested in like reading about it more. And with Design Buddies, we have like this channel called FAQ New to Design, where we combined like everyone's favorite design resources all into one channel and categorize them. So y'all can refer to that as well in Design Buddies, which the link is there, but I can drop it as well. But yeah, so that concludes my presentation. I think I have about 13 minutes for Q&A, so feel free to connect with me or ask me any questions.
Cool. So now the floor is open. Everyone, anyone with a question, feel free to unmute your mic and ask Grace directly, or just type in the chat. Dixon.
Hi.
Hello.
So at EA, right? Like, what exactly, say if you were to provide a mock-up or style guide to your dev, do they expect everything to be documented on there, or do they not really? And then they come and ask you.
Usually, unfortunately, I can't show any files because of NDA. But generally, I'm talking at a high level. I document, so I create a separate component library because they use Storybook to build. A lot of the companies use Storybook or like a component library to build all their components. So I have like a master sheet of all the different components, all the states, all the styles, all the colors, all the spacing, and have that. And then I have a separate page on that file called the spacing guidelines. So I try to standardize spacing conventions throughout, like the distances, like the padding. So for example, if we use multiples of 10, I have that noted down. So I just try to be as detailed as I can. And sometimes I would also link the tickets, right? Like the ticket number inside the Figma file. So I just try to like make it as easy for them to find what screen they're building out as possible.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah,
Yeah.
recently gotten mockups and style guides, and then it's blank and nobody documented anything, and that was weird.
Oh yeah, documentation is also really important, especially if you're like onboarding other designers too. And if you come back to it after some time, and you don't forget. So definitely recommend documenting.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? What are y'all working on?
Yeah, if anyone has another question, just like, feel free to unmute your mic, or pop a message in the chat.
Are designs isn't important to add in a portfolio? I would say it depends. I would say if you worked on it, yes. Yeah, but so inside when you're interviewing for jobs, sometimes like you see like product designer, design systems. That product designer at that company focuses on design systems. Typically, in my experience at EA, I usually like because I've worked on design system in the past, but it's not like my primary focus. Like I'm not working on it anymore. I usually focus on product. If you worked on it, then include it, but don't feel pressure to include it. I would say on the case study, if you reference the design system or if you contributed new components to it, I would reference, but don't feel pressure to like create a whole system and just have it as a portfolio piece. It's not like the key thing, unless you're applying for a design system specific role, in my experience. Oh, I see someone raised their hand. Oh, Victoria.
Hi, I didn't want to just start talking. So I did have a question about Storybook. A company I am interviewing with right now, they mentioned Storybook, and if I get this role, I would be the only UX designer on the team. So can you tell me a little bit more about Storybook? Because I haven't done anything with that yet.
Yeah, Storybook is basically like the design system in the code format. And I would say for me, my experience with Storybook is going in there to reference the spacing guidelines as like documentation. So just being able to use the inspect function on the browser just to inspecting components and reference.
Okay.
It's like pretty easy to navigate. I wouldn't feel too pressured to do that, but I feel like it also really depends on how you work with your team, because in my experience, I've worked directly with engineering and I just like reference. They already built, so when I came on the project, they've already built everything on Storybook. So I just reference that and I see what naming, what like spacing conventions, what colors and typography they use for other components, and make sure that same convention and motif of how they set it up is there in like the new components I'm building for Storybook. So I mostly use that as like referencing, and I use the inspect function a lot on Chrome.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I have another one if you have time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, earlier about that comment for like the 62.5% thing for your font size. Is that common in industry, or do people just leave it at 16 pixels for one rem?
I never heard of that actually.
Really? Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh.
The rem,
On the bootcamp, they kind of like drilled it into us that, oh, we should always set the rem to be 10 pixels. So then when you like make different sizes for the H1, H2s and stuff.
In bootcamp?
Yeah, you can just like put like a regular, like, oh, this is one rem if it's 10 pixels, and then oh, this is two rems is 10 pixels, or like 1.6 for the body, or like 2.4 for the headings or something like that.
Interesting. Yeah, it's not in my experience that they've ever done that.
Oh.
Typically, what they do in industry is called fluid typography. So sometimes the text, the sizes will change depending on the size of your screen. So like your header fonts might be, your H5 might be like H4 on mobile, and there'll be like a clamp code in there.
Yeah,
the
pixels are like different sizes on mobile and the desktop, right? So that's why we use rem instead of pixels.
Yeah, they use the fluid typography.
Yeah, you like upsize the accessibility stuff to like 110%. That'll change with RAM.
Yeah.
I thought people change it to like 10 pixels per RAM, but I guess
not. Yeah, we use 16 per RAM here, so.
Oh wow.
I'm not sure. I guess it really depends on the engineering team.
Huh.
Yeah, in industry, there's no like, it all depends on how your team works. That's what I realized. Like when I was like learning design, I thought everything had to follow a textbook, but in real life, it's all depends on how your team set it up. And also on different products, it depends on how your team set up the code base.
Yeah.
And how they work together. Yeah. Because some engineers, they need like more detailed documentation versus some other front end ones. They just see the Figma and like build it right away. They're able to like navigate the padding and all the colors and type on Figma. So I would say it really depends on who you're working with. And just try to like communicate with them to just see what's the best way to work together, and constantly get feedback on each other is what I can say.
Yeah, for sure. Communication is key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we still have 5 minutes. So probably room for another question or two if there is any. Yeah.
What's the question for y'all? What are the biggest challenges of y'all getting in a career in tech? I'm just curious. That's a big question. Like, what do you think is like that barrier? Getting paid? Yeah. Yeah, I hope everyone makes the big monies. Everyone get that bread. Yeah. Honestly, like I did a lot of volunteer work to like build out my portfolio, and that helped me get paid. But always negotiate your salary. Don't take your first offer. And do your research. Ask people their salaries. Stop making salaries a taboo topic, is what I could say for a new generation of people in tech. Negotiate. Don't be able to just negotiate your salary. Get that monies. Getting interview stage. And also when you're negotiating, ask them what their budget is first, because sometimes it could be like higher than what you expected. And if they're asking you like what your expected salary is, ask them like what is the range for this position, and like what factors determine that. And then have them like Glassdoor and just like salary.design and ask people around like where you are, how much they get paid. Just make sure you're not getting lowballed. Oh, HR is catching on this, and they what a question. Ooh. Getting interview stage, my graduate. Oh. Yeah. I found a LinkedIn post that kind of talks about that. So one of my friends, he posted this thing on LinkedIn that talks about like why some people are not getting interviews and not. His name is Hang Zhu. So just look at his LinkedIn, and it like breaks it down pretty clearly. I just saw it like this week. So I feel like that might help. But I hope you all get that bread and get that job. If you ever get rejected, ask them like why you got rejected, because it could be valuable feedback to help you keep improving. Link, please. Hang anything. He's my friend, and he posts like a lot of great stuff on LinkedIn. Oh yes, Victoria.
I had something to add. I've been in the job hunt since like November, and I just recently started getting traction. I'm currently interviewing with 2 different companies and past like second round interviews with both of them. And I went through several different versions of my resume, and for the longest time I was not even referencing all the years I've done in my social media management. And once I finally actually put that on my resume, I started getting more traction. So like my advice would be like look into things that you've done, anybody that like you've done freelance or anything that you can put on your resume, because you can reference that.
Yeah, I agree. Nothing is ever a waste of time. I feel like, especially in design, there's a lot of skills that from your other jobs that will cross over to design.
Right. Don't give up,
Great.
y'all.
Yeah, let's get this bread, y'all. Get the big monies. And good luck in your interviews. Help you slay.
Thank you.
Grace, in terms of salary negotiation, I had a question on that.
Yeah.
So when you are going around like asking people in sort of the same position, would you recommend to ask like people in the company who are working in similar roles, or will they
Yes.
like snitch on the HR?
Oh, good question. For me, I've always asked them like, do you feel comfortable sharing each other's salaries so we can both make sure we're not lowballed? So they can make sure they like understand that it will help them as well, so they can't snitch. Because I feel like they might be curious as well, so they might benefit from you sharing. Because what if they're the one being lowballed? So it always helps. I feel like salary transparency is something that I feel like needs to happen more. I've seen a lot of like the stuff that goes behind the scenes and read a lot about them. That's why I'm like, go negotiate everyone, and like don't be afraid of sharing, because we don't want anyone to get lowballed here. Yeah, but frame it in a way that like that helps them too. And like sometimes I usually only ask people that I like know kind of well that probably won't snitch on me. But if they do snitch, I don't think you can get in trouble for that, because if HR flags you for that, that's probably not the company you want to work for, to be honest, in my opinion. Maybe this is just like me being a little jaded, but yeah, I mean that's what I think.
Yeah, cool. If there's not any other questions, thank you so much, Grace. Oh,
Yeah, thanks for
Dixon,
having me.
you have
Oh,
another
yeah.
question.
No, one more question. So actually, what's the industry like right now in terms of entry level salary for like UX and web dev?
So I can only share. I'll share mine. But I'm in the SF Bay area, so my internship at. Wait, actually, I might need to check with HR before I share this publicly. So yeah, I would say a range. From what I've seen on Glassdoor for internships in the SF Bay area for UX design is like for San Francisco, San Jose is like between I would say $30 to $35 an hour. For entry level associate designer, it's like 55 an hour ish. And then senior designer, I've seen like 180K a year. For mid-level, I would say like 120 a year. But it really depends. I would just because it also depends on like your location, and the company's budget and stuff, and how much like your stock compensation they give you. Because for like public companies, you often get like RSUs or registered stock units, or you can buy shares. Also, you might get like relocation packages, bonuses. So all these things factor in on top of like your total, on top of like your base salary. So I would take all these into consideration. Also, like, are they hybrid? Are they remote? Are they in person? Because commuting to office could be really taxing. And so it's important to like take everything into consideration. Also, like what kind of projects are you working on? Because it could be something like paid really high, but you like hate your work, and I don't think it's worth it. So I feel like finding a job is like definitely more than salary, but when you can, definitely try to like leverage higher, and get paid higher, for that. So I would say again, it depends. I think everything depends.
Yeah, and recently, like one of my friends from a previous cohort of a bootcamp, brain station I was in, right, and then she got offered like two offers, I think. She graduated like in December, and then she got offers in like January and February for like 80 grand, and then I thought that was like considered high to be entry level for like Vancouver at least. But then apparently she got both offers, and then she didn't even negotiate. I told her to do it, but she didn't do it. But yeah, it's like so apparently
make sure you all negotiate.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's considered high, or is that like the industry standard now, or what is that? Because I've also seen other like job postings about like web dev, and then I think there was like this one posting was trying to offer like 30 to 50K per year for like a web dev, and we're just like, what the hell is this?
That's
shit?
hella low. Yeah.
It's like, you can go to McDonald's and make
Yeah.
what is that, right? Like so.
Yeah. I don't know for Vancouver though. So I can't answer that, but I would just search up averages and see from there and try to get for the high range.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I see one more question in the chat. What's the most helpful thing you could do for your devs on the project? Yeah, I would say ask them how they would like to see your Figma files. Like, do they need to see all the spacing variables? Do they prefer to have that all documented? Do you prefer them to keep it all on one page, separate all the pages? So I guess just like try to accommodate like how they view it the best and communicate with them. Because some devs, they like it. They like super detailed. Some devs, they don't need it. But just ask them is the best. I don't know them.
Cool. If there's not any other questions, thank you so much, Grace, for doing this workshop. And yeah, hope all of you guys learned a lot of things from our workshop on design styling and design systems. And thanks again. Happy hacking, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Hope y'all win.
Yeah. See ya. Negotiate for salary.
Negotiate.
Also,